of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay.
Not only the seminar while at the convention, then now, if you have something else you do, this was just an impromptu meet and greet. If you just want to say hello and hi.
No, I've tried to stop over at the various different commissions and committees, and I haven't caught up to you guys yet. So, no, it's good just to. I mean, I think, like I said, I think I've seen everybody, most of you here or there.
Yeah.
Could I ask a question since I'm the new?
Sure. So, I'll just officially. So, I'm the new city engineer. Name's Paul Dietrich. Little brief background on me. I've been doing this. I've been municipal engineer for over 24 years up in Upper Township, planning board, zoning board engineer, city engineer, and up in Upper, they didn't have a. They don't have an administrator in there. So, I was.
Upper doesn't have a township.
They do now. They do now. They, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, they had an administrator. I'll say not the same as the city manager, not the same role as what we have as a city manager here in Cape May. Different form of government. It's a committee form of government. And even though they had a township administrator, they did not give them full authority to do even what he could do under that form of government.
But now that we have you, all our problems are solved.
No.
Paul,
I think I'm here as a resource for both the governing body, staff, and the residents to draw upon where, and I found what I found myself really talking about. I'm as much as a translator, especially on the land use side, in being able to help navigate residents and potential buyers through the land use process, because it's a daunting process, can be very complicated, and it has a lot of different layers. And I don't think up until now the city hasn't had somebody that can speak all the languages, whether it's zoning, construction, flood, HPC, CAFRA and the DEP, and all those different things. And I can help translate, and that's kind of what as I've been describing it to people, I kind of translate it in, because I have enough technical knowledge with it all.
so I know, Russ, you have a question, but I just want to say this was probably one of the most critical elements in us hiring Paul, because land use has long been somewhat of a challenge. When people go for applications, as many of us are familiar with, you go to construction and then you go to zoning, and sometimes you have to go to HPC. And one of the real challenges that people have expressed in frustrations is feeling as if they're getting bounced from one place to the other, and having someone who really is sort of at the top of that administrative function, who can really understand all of those elements and floodplain and everything else, is a bonus to the city, because it has long been a frustration for homeowners, property owners, businesses, and feeling as if they get one answer one time when they walk through the door and a different one the next person that they speak to. So it really was a critical element that when we were recruiting, wanted someone who was going to be able to sort of change that role, change the how the construction and zoning and all of the subcommittees work together to make sure that if there was a problem, that it got escalated to a person who could answer the question professionally, and that
Each little section of the city has its own universe.
exactly.
Yeah, but it's not really. I wouldn't call it worse. It's just a different layer, because like up at Upper Township, we had a difficult layer in Strathmere. Strathmere was the only barrier island in the state of New Jersey that is still on septic systems. On 4,000 square foot lots, septic systems on a barrier island. No, so every town has its own nuance of layers, and you got to have, and what I was able to bring to the residents, which I thought was a very valuable tool, was instead of going to an engineer and architect and having to spend a couple $1,000s to get the what if can I do here with my piece of property, they can have a conversation with me, and I can help them kind of steer them in a direction so that when they go talk to a professional, they've got a game plan and know what they're looking for.
The other thing that we, as a committee, we run up against and have for the last 3 years is that each of those components of the government have their own little universe. They all have their own data sets too, which don't mix together very well. And so data from one section is going to be useless unless we can somehow integrate it. And we have been pushing the city to coordinate data collection and data usage, because if you have the data and you can't make decisions based on it, then what's the point of keeping the data? So,
Well, that's sort of related to it, and Maureen helped a lot with the explanation, but if you had to name 3 top priorities for the next 12 months, what would they be?
I don't know if I'm ready to kind of put those top priorities.
Name
Yeah,
one.
because
What's one?
I
Or
haven't.
2? I mean, what would you say would be the main responsibility that you have to the city and to the residents, or response?
I think on the capital projects is, we have a lot of capital projects and grants, and being able to coordinate all of those different functions and making sure that we're getting the best value out of our consultants for the residents.
That makes sense.
No, I don't, I'm sorry.
They're going to repave Lafayette
Left
Street
Street.
with a 6-inch water main.
Yeah, well-
Which, when you get down into the St. James Place, those buildings are so close.
But unfortunately,
Not enough water to put out a working fire.
Yeah.
Or you get down to Pharaoh's old boatyard where they built the houses that.
but see, that's, but I think that's where, with me here, that's, right. Yeah, but, I mean, but that road's already, I mean, we already delayed that road for this one aspect, so we can't, and that's one of the things council said is, hey, keep an eye on
Gotcha.
all of those projects, so when the county engineer has, hey, we got a project coming on, or we're looking at a municipal street, and that's what we're trying to do. 90 years old.
Part of the reason I asked my question is because for any new person that comes into a role or position, et cetera, I think after a while, it's like the fire hose, and trying to figure out, which of the hose you're gonna focus on that's most important, I think is gonna be really helpful to not just you, but to others.
Paul, it's great that you're in a position to be able to address all these issues, and as you said, talk to property owners to kind of point them in the right direction. Do you know if has it been communicated to all of those different offices, those different departments, to say, hey, yeah, we'll send them to Paul just to have that.
I mean, we've already,
discussion?
I mean, to some degree, some of the staff has been put under my supervision as far as, within the building. So, we have weekly, daily type discussions. When issues come up, they're bringing them to me. And I think that's also, even on the capital projects or the small things, because you have a technical person in the building, you don't have to wait to call a consultant to get a proposal to answer, what kind of widget do we need to fix this quick little thing here? I can help get that done. I mean, I'll just give you a quick example. Over at Public Works, we have a new print machine to print out the sign faces for signs, so we can have a sign shop in-house. They were building a little enclosure structure support for it, and they're building a new wall and a platform for it to sit on, and the construction officials, they're like, oh, I guess we should get a construction permit to make sure that, this big piece of equipment we're putting up there is going to be supported, doesn't fall down. And the construction official said, hey, why don't you go get it, signed and sealed? Well, before me, you had to go out and hire an architect or an engineer, designed it, and it would have taken months just to get that small little thing. And I walked over there, looked at it, drew up a sketch. That afternoon, walked it down to the construction official, and 2 days later, Public Works has a construction permit to continue working on a small project just for them, and they have a safe secure place for their sign shop. So that's just a,
No, but I think it's an important example. It's when that was one of the first things that was done is that the construction and zoning departments, all of those current individuals, their reporting structure changed. So it sent clearly a message. When you don't have an answer, there was no in-house expertise for that. And that's where the sort of the wheel went with residents and with property owners and with businesses. They just kept getting moved from one place to the other and not getting, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, inconsistent answers, which created some real problems when they were coming before HPC or zoning or planning.
And
now that has been, at least with Paul's presence, we now have a process that says we don't need to have it escalate to that. Yeah.
And I don't think we need to, it's no blame to any one department or individual in the process. It's just because they're all in their
Zones,
lane
yeah.
of what they're doing.
Yeah,
And
right,
it's like,
right. Yeah,
they
right.
know that, and that's where, that's
Yeah.
kind of how, as I've been describing it, I akin it to a translator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being able
Right.
to translate and move somebody from
Well,
one lane
hopefully-
to the other lane, and
Hopefully that structure helps with their kind of cross collaboration as well, right? Are they getting to know each other a little bit better and
I think when I started talking about it, they had some of that, but I think
Yeah.
you're always afraid to some degree to say, that's kind of their job, and, and then.
You're only
we're
going to push
reaching their bounds, and they
so
don't wanna
much with a
step on
colleague.
somebody else's.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
whereas-
no,
whereas
but I'm just
if
thinking
council-
like, when it all funnels up into that, like when that structural change actually hopefully does.
Yeah, and I think because they're
eliminate some
meeting
of that.
together as a unit, and if there's a problem that
Yeah.
between construction and, official or a zoning person, they can sit together and say, okay, this is what I look at it and how I interpret it, and the construction official, may say, well, one of my sub guys went out and thought it was this. Then for the first time, they're sitting with someone who has the ability to look at both sides of it and educate them so that it may not arise to that the next time. It's also a good opportunity for the people to be, educated and look beyond their current silo,
And that's kind of consistent with what we've been trying to do, and let me just tell you that my plan for next month's meeting would be right in that alley. I would like to set up a roundtable of everybody in city administration that has something to do with code enforcement, so that we can, because one of the things we've always wrestled with as a committee is the same kind of silo mentality from code enforcement. So I think I'd like to have everybody from the police chief on down
Right.
who's involved with code enforcement, just to get.
I think you've heard this kind of comment. Everyone is, and everyone, I would say, does not have a clear understanding of what code enforcement does. And I'll leave it at that because we could spend the next hour and a half talking about it, and that's next month. But it really is, quite frankly, Paul, one of the areas that it's one of these, and again, it's not anything about the individuals who all work very hard, and they do what they believe to be their job and within that framework, but there are things that people who have expectations about code enforcement and where the lines stop and another line begins, and that's the clarity. It really needs to be fleshed out a lot more than it has in the past.
And
Yeah.
code enforcement is probably one of the, and they're not under my
Yep,
purview.
we know that,
But
right.
my experience in code enforcement, it is literally one of the worst positions to have in this building. Because you make no one happy.
No.
You make
no.
no one happy.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
you're
yeah. It's like
it's
the
worse than a
compliance
marriage
officer.
counselor, because you're out there to solve the
Right.
Hatfield and McCoy's battle.
Yeah, right.
Half
yeah.
the time, because everybody,
It's all about views and opinions.
and it is a very hard thing to do. It's,
Citizens and taxpayers get this approach.
Right. So, I mean, we won't debate that for the rest of tonight. We'll try and at least get some discussion underway next
I don't want
month.
to keep it too long,
Yeah,
but
right.
let me just review, just so that you know. The MTRAC committee was formed 3 years ago with the purpose of examining ways where we can raise revenue and contain costs so that the taxpayers are not the first choice of funding anything new. So our mission has been to find sources of revenue and to look at organizational things that could be done better. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years. take this with you, if you will. That's a listing of all of the things that we have studied and made recommendations on, and you'll find that the council has actually done several of the things that we've suggested doing, and there's things on the hopper. But we're not gonna talk about that now, but just for your own information purposes.
It's been a significant contributor to why the tax rate for local use has been able to stay flat for 4 years, is during 3 of those years, the contributions that Dennis and my predecessors on the committee made were able to raise revenue without raising taxes.
Yeah, that's our goal, if we can do it. So thanks for stopping.
That's right.
There you go. Right? Okay. Thanks for stopping in. We appreciate your,
Not a problem, and office is upstairs, and if you ever need anything,
will do.
feel free to reach out.
Thanks again.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, I want to see outside sick.
No sidebars. No. All right, thank you. Here we go. Our first item on the agenda is going to be a report from Martin on how well he's been doing with his quest to
It has been a quest. Thanks. So over the course of, since the end of July, when I received the first set of data, until this Monday, when I received the last set of updated data, that quest has been to try to understand the level of mercantile license administration that's occurred in 2023 versus 22, especially for short-term residential rentals. We talked about it in preliminary terms at an earlier meeting. It wound up in the newspaper, which is fine. But that was, as we found out, relatively preliminary. The overall result is very similar. We had 10.6% new licenses versus at that time, I had said 10.3. So it's a minuscule difference. But the composition of the licenses was somewhat different, meaning that I had been wondering why we had 20% new licenses, but 10% of licenses that didn't renew. That hasn't actually been true. It was the way that the data was cut. The dilemma, and I now have been working with, the way that I found to unlock this was, I needed all the licenses. I needed the business licenses. I needed the peddler's licenses. I needed, the hot dog cart licenses. Because there are 100, I'll get into the data, but there are something like 176 different combinations of licenses that are being issued. Just for short-term rental, every short-term rental is required to contribute $50 to the tourism fund and $25 to the parking fund. That's 3 different codes. 3 different codes means 6 different combinations. Okay? So when you're trying to pull data out of the database, it depends on how you define the parameters, what data got pulled. And I was able to get past that by greatly expanding to get the full universe. We've seen the most movement in the 0 to 1,000 square foot licenses, where we had 43 new. You can see the data. I won't go into it in great detail. The revenue increased by a slightly larger percentage because of the way that the revenue breaks down between the licenses. We had 125 unique new properties in 2023. That's a 12.3% increase. So that's the positive.
Could I interrupt you?
Sure.
What do you call unique new?
Because we have multiple
I mean, what's the definition?
Sure, because we have multiple dwellings on a particular property. So there may have been 10 Congress Street may have had 20 different unique properties before, and now they have 24. So even though it's one address, there's 4 unique properties that obtained a license. Okay?
Yeah, it's
I just-
another way of saying dwelling units. It's a dwelling unit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That may be easier for people to
Sure.
understand.
Great.
What would be easier?
Dwelling unit. Yep.
Rather than.
Yeah. So a new unit that wasn't
Right.
counted last year, that
That
didn't have a
did
license.
not apply for license last year.
Right, okay.
And the dwelling unit is the term the Census Bureau
Sure.
uses too, so.
Happy to use it, absolutely. Now, what caused that? One is that there was an expansion of the marketplace. We've read that in the newspapers. There are, in some towns, as many as 20% additional rental units that are being made available.
Really?
The other is that there may have been properties that changed hands from someone that didn't rent to someone that is choosing to rent and take advantage of what has become a relatively lucrative marketplace. And the third is that we did send a letter back in February that reminded people of their obligation. I believe it had some impact. I believe it did not have as much of an impact as I would have hoped. But I also recognize that we took a very kind of soft approach with it, and we can talk as a committee about whether we want to try a different, or the more direct approach next year. On page 4, we did still have 18 dwelling units that had licenses in 2022 and didn't renew in 2023. And now that could be that I do hear of people that say, that's it, I'm done, it's too much of a hassle, I'm not going to rent my property out anymore. People don't care for it the way that I want them to. It's just not worth it to me anymore.
Do we have those addresses?
Yes. 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 Again, some properties may have been sold and didn't get back into the rental market this year, or some may be in the process of being sold and therefore are being left vacant. I don't think that that's going to be very many. And then there are some that may have fallen out of compliance. The biggest concern that I have is that I don't think we're anywhere close to 100% of the residential housing stock that's being offered for rent. I think there are still a lot of properties that are out of compliance that are not included in this. These are only the people that applied in '22 and didn't apply in '23.
Yeah.
And I also think, I mean, Dennis had highlighted the data, the growth in the data through the COVID years, and it was significantly increased year over year. That's slowed. And my concern is that voluntary compliance, just reminding people of their obligation, has pretty much reached its limit. Dennis is going to talk about some software that I think may actually be helpful in that regard.
Marty, I'm sorry.
Do we have a plan to try to beat out,
Well, I think the software that Dennis is going to talk about might provide some assistance to that.
Something very similar to this, if not very similar to this, will be presented to City Council. And I think that one of the conclusions that we would want to introduce to City Council is, MTRAC's opinion is it's time to begin enforcing.
Right.
when did we stop enforcing?
Well, we have,
We've never fined.
I don't think we've ever really enforced it.
Cindy, your mic's not on.
They told us they never had time.
and we wanted to use
Remember?
the velvet glove approach for the
They said they
first
didn't have
couple of
time.
years.
Even,
But after that, I thought they were starting.
They
even,
said they didn't have time.
even this year's letter. at the
Right,
advice-
Dennis? Am I wrong?
No, you're right, you're right.
He sat there and said, we don't have time.
But
Even,
I thought he'd find time after we
No.
embarrassed him a little bit.
even this year's letter, we went from, you have to provide a signature that you're not renting your property out, to, hey, guys, it would be really nice if you abided with the law. Right?
Well, there's also an insurance requirement now that was added in this year that, and that's part of the mercantile license application, that they must prove that they have, insurance
Right.
for the property. Now, one of the things that Zach did ask me to do was take a look at the current mercantile license application form. Erin did send it to me. We might have the chance to make some modifications to it. I don't know about, the language of a cover letter, but I don't know if anyone saw the article, and I want to say it was in the Cape May County Herald, that highlighted the fact that property rentals are down across the county, with the exception of Lower Township.
Lower, yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting that everywhere is saying that they're seeing a decline in the number of properties that are being rented out, and that it was a surprise to everyone that Lower Township was experiencing an uptick.
Yeah, I don't
And-
think it was a decline. I think it was that there are more vacant units. That's because the housing stock increased by 20%. So
Right.
supply has finally exceeded demand, and that's leading to the vacancy.
Right.
Cindy, you look like you had something you wanted to say.
Oh, well, just kind of thinking out loud, that there is an intermediate step between, no enforcement and enforcement, and it might, I don't know if the voluntary self-reporting has entirely dried up, but if there's a way to kind of implement some of this software and gather more information, and then, you're bringing people into compliance rather than skipping straight ahead to fines and enforcement, kind of that letter that comes out that says, oh, we've implemented this software and we recognize that your place was listed last year. We didn't see this on the list of people who have mercantile licenses. We will be enforcing this year. So, and maybe do that gentle step before skipping straight to.
And
I thought we were actually going to talk about that later. I didn't think you were recommending necessarily going right to that.
I didn't say that anybody was.
Yeah.
No, I just think.
I'm not arguing with anyone. I'm just saying there is a way to kind of roll it out in a little bit more of a friendly way and bring people into.
I think the biggest challenge that we've had is really the QA process.
Yeah.
It's really knowing, I think there's a sense that properties may not be in compliance. And no one really knows what that number is. We don't know if we're off by 20% or 10% or 5%. And so if we could at least have an understanding through some kind of a program, which I think Dennis is going to at least share with us something that he's investigated, that says, we believe in your market that really the universe of rentals is closer to X.
Right.
And we know how many have, applied for a mercantile license. Then we could at least say, okay, now we know really what that number might be.
Right. Well, it's an
somewhere.
educated speculation because you have the number of listings, even if you're just looking at a general universe, find some percentage of them are saying they're in Cape May and they're not really in Cape May, they're in North Cape May or whatever.
They're
Some
not.
percentage of them are maybe not active, but, it's multiples of the number of listings there are versus the number of people
Yeah, I
who
mean, they're on
sought mercantile
4 or 5 different
licenses.
platforms, including the Realtor.
Yeah.
So, go ahead, Marty, I'm
Or
sorry.
one question I had was the last sentence of that page, the whole issue about homeowners become aware of exceptions.
So I'll get to that in just
Yeah.
1 second.
All right, because I would like to hear about that.
The intermediate step that we were planning to follow, and I agree with the outcome of changing the letter this year, but we also reserved the right to go back to the approach we were going to follow, which was every homeowner gets a letter, every homeowner returns a letter, which says, I plan to rent, I do not plan to rent. And that was something that we backed off from at Lou Belasco's advice, and I thought it was good advice, but I do think that we can consider whether that's a more appropriate step to go through this coming year.
I just find it difficult that there's no reason that people have to return that letter. Like, you're not going to enforce if they don't return that letter.
No, we can follow up. So the problem
Yeah.
with trying to go through the rental offerings, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
There's no way to really cull that data. You'd have to go line by line and match it up to these 1,000 properties that are already on the list. To answer your question, I do believe, and actually a friend of mine posed this question. He said, well, why do you think that homeowners aren't turning each other in?
Your neighbors.
Well, that's part of it, but then again, he kind of felt like that's not really a big part of what Cape May is all about these days. But I said, who are they going to turn it into? Now we're back to code enforcement again. So if you know that a neighbor is not applying for a license and you are, that fairness issue is a big
Oh,
part
so
of
when you say exceptions, you don't really mean exceptions.
exceptions to applying for license
Exceptions that they didn't apply,
didn't apply.
and that feels unfair.
Well, but it's not really, it's not a true exception, it's just that non-compliance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they
so-
accepted themselves, so it's not that someone else accepted.
No, but the wording of this would suggest that there are legitimate exceptions.
It's fair.
I think the word should be become aware of the fact
Non-compliant.
that non-compliance is, okay, or something else.
Made a note.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
It does raise the prospect of some status that we don't want to have in here, which is somehow you can apply for or receive an exemption
Yep.
from this whole thing.
Yeah, that's the only thing I say.
Yep.
The other question I have, real quickly, is when I think of our area, for instance, on the East End, there are a number of new homes, and I know a bunch of them are rentals. So when a new home comes up, is there some way that at least, you know, something could be given to the new homeowner who just purchased the home, whether it's through the realtor or whoever else.
Yeah, I created a new welcome letter.
So-
I did myself last February.
Because every one of those.
And it goes out
Every one of
to-
those behind my
right.
house.
Yeah.
being-
Has
The-
become
And
a
the
vacation
tax,
rental.
and,
If they
and,
were a homeowner, if they were a taxpayer, as of February, they got a letter saying you need to apply for a license. Okay?
I was suggesting an additional step.
there is an additional step that,
Could you get that welcome letter?
Well, no, I'm saying when,
Well, Maureen did it.
so the tax assessor, every week, when someone comes and the deed is, transferred or the deed is, filed, they send out the new homeowner welcome letter, and in there, I included, as part of that, things they need to know about Cape May if they're just new.
All right, good.
And it's about 2 pages long, and it includes if you plan on renting your property. So I will recirculate that around. I did that last February myself.
that's great, thanks.
And if there's things that we would like to add to it, we certainly could.
Yeah, and
If you could circulate that, I'd love to
Okay.
read it. Yeah, thanks.
And the other thing we need to examine early on is the application for a mercantile license and what information we ask. I'm thinking of at least a couple of things that ought to be on there. Number one, and this helps code enforcement. Number one, I think the applicant should put down what the square footage of their property is. Because in previous years, the question has been raised, well, how do we know it's the accurate square footage? The code inspector could do that. Now, let's take that off the plate of the code inspector and have the applicant say, I have 3,000 square feet in my property. Then it's easier for the code enforcement to examine that.
I have the last application form from Erin. I will circulate that, and we probably need to spend, I'm going to say that it's going to be between now and the next meeting, because she's anxious for us to, review this, and if we're going to make changes, she needs to sort of make sure that, she's going to be able to get it out timely. It needs to go before council, you all understand what the process will be. So it's not something we want to necessarily wait and start addressing at the end of the year. So, okay, so,
The other issue
Well,
on that.
the reason I ask in part is because if you look at the prior page that Martin put in his presentation, there were 17 homes between 4,000 and 5,000 square feet in 2022, and only 18 in 2023, 7 over 5,000 in 22, and only 7 in 23. And yet, a number of these properties I'm talking about
Yeah,
were
they're the-
rented until
yeah.
2023.
Yeah.
So, and I can assure you, every one of them is over 4,000 square feet.
True.
Yeah.
So there you go. I mean,
There's a lot of demand, yeah, there's a lot of demand for those large,
I think the
Yeah.
default, going forward, the default position is the house is a rental property unless otherwise proven.
The license is collecting square footage information indirectly, because you have to check a box of
Yeah,
which
right.
category
Yeah,
you fall in.
exactly.
Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
As I was going through this, I did spot check from time to time. I would look on Zillow, I would look to see whether the square footage of the house matched the square footage that's on the license. I did see, for example, one instance where there's a house, and I won't give the address, that is 5,500 square feet, and its license says it's between 1,000 and 2,000.
Yeah.
Now,
I found a couple of those last year,
it
too.
was 1,000 to 2,000 on sheet one. It was over 5,000 on sheet two, and it went back to 1,000 to 2,000. I don't know why that is. Okay? So I would have to look at the license
They cut their
application
house in
to see, is it possible that it was misrecorded? It may not have been the homeowner that caused the incorrect licensing category to be added.
See, that's where you should be able to pick up a phone to code enforcement, send them out to check it out, and say, we have a discrepancy.
But the homeowner may not have caused the discrepancy. The person that logged the data may.
Well, it doesn't matter, but find a way to solve it.
So, and that takes us to.
or it's also, there are some properties, and this isn't probably that case, but you've got the main house and the cottage in the back, right? So if you look on, then they stay in the main house and rent out the cottage in the back. So what's the rental space? So maybe specifying, okay, this square footage really applies
Would
to,
require 2 licenses,
right?
okay? And so there are a great many.
Or if they just don't rent out the one, then it's just one license, but, yeah.
The other two things in the app, number of bedrooms and sleeping capacity.
Well, I'm going to send this application out to everyone on this committee, and we're going to look at it, and we're going to,
Good.
because, you know, if we're going to be making changes, those changes must be recommended to council for adoption, so that Erin has this in advance of,
Well, let's plan to do that next meeting.
that's my intention.
Yeah.
Okay, Mark.
So if we,
that
if we
brings us-
think that, I'm sorry, Martin,
Yeah, go ahead.
but if we think that we've maximized as far as the voluntary compliance, then we're talking about dedicating some resource to find the people that are non-compliant,
Well,
right?
can we go to this new software? Because I think, not that it answers all of our questions, but I think it might,
I've got one page left. Let me-
Okay. Oh, sorry.
And then we'll transition to the software. So as I went through the process, I tried to figure out, well, what's causing us to get caught up? And when I looked at it, it's extremely labor-intensive. There are descriptions, especially with the business licenses, where there will be a business that is applying for 6 different codes.
Right.
Okay? And when all of these codes are being selected, it gets into the comment section, and I assume results in there being a charge to the licensee based upon the number of codes that they've selected. There are 38 different code sections that affect mercantile licenses.
Yeah.
Okay? Every time that we have a new need, we add a new code. Okay? There are 173 unique code combinations. All right? For the 1,500 licenses. These are business and residential. Okay? There are hundreds, so for every 8 licenses has its own code. And a part of that is that we have, for example, that tourism fee and that parking fee that applies to every single license. It's listed separately in the database. So if you put the parking fee first, and then the short-term residential code, and then the tourism fee, that's a combination. If you put the tourism fee first, that's a different combination. I don't see any reason why we're recording in the database, why we're recording things that are mandatory. Every single license is supposed to have it.
So one of the things that Steve and I were just sort of sidebarring on is, I don't know enough about how the system is that they use in the clerk's office for tracking. They do have new software. I believe Erin said to me that it might have been purchased in the last year or 2, okay? The second thing is that all of these codes, I'm not sure if they somehow align to any budgetary requirements the way the budget is required with the state. I don't know if there's something that and it may be that it's all sort of self-controlled and could be streamlined and not knowing what that effort might be. So before making any presumptions about, saying, okay, just streamline it, first of all, understanding what this software that the clerk's office is currently using for it. As I said, it seems to be in the last year or 2.
Let me give you an example
Go ahead.
of how this works. Like Martin says, there's one licensee could probably have 7 different appendages to his license. Now, when that gets logged in the clerk's office, the software they're currently using puts all 7 of those things in the same field, which makes it almost impossible to sort that data, because if one field contains 7 different things and they're not all in the same order, they're not entered in the
So
same order.
I think it also matters what order you enter them in.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and so the software is just picking it up in the
But-
order you put it in.
But it's a question,
Right.
it's really not a question of state compliance or anything, it's a question of what kind of software and how you sort your data. If, instead of one field with 7 possible entries.
You need 7 different
You should have
fields.
7
Yeah,
fields.
so you can run a report on them.
Exactly.
Right,
exactly.
right.
And
So
we don't do that.
So without sitting down and looking at it and spending some time, and I'm happy to do that with Erin and taking a look at it and seeing if there are modifications that can be made. But I think we need to enter into this and be thoughtful about what we're going to ask for. If there's changes that need to be made, this may be software that we don't necessarily have the ability to change the code to be able to do it. And not understanding, whether this is purchased, who it was purchased by, we all know that when we
It
do
can be
that.
modified because it's all Excel-based.
Okay.
It's all Excel-based, so
Okay.
you can modify, change the.
Well, then they need someone who has some Excel experience and
They
is
need somebody
facile
to
with that
actually
kind of stuff.
Sit down and do that.
Right.
The second example that I drew upon was that bakeries, beach concessions, boat rental establishments, and dry cleaning plants, of which there's one, have separate code sections. We have a separate code section for one dry cleaning plant. And they charge $213 per license. There is a catch-all category called all businesses not classified herein that also charges $213.
Right.
I don't really understand it. Aaron may have an answer for us. Why do we need to know how many bakeries we have in town? What makes a bakery different from any other food establishment?
You mean for purposes of this?
For purposes of, we have a code section for bakeries. Code section. Lawn cutting, property maintenance, and house cleaning are all charged $175. They're all providing a service to homeowners and businesses. I don't know that we really, unless there is some regulatory need, I don't really know what value there is to the city of having these three things.
Well, I think because they're operating a business within the city, we need to understand what they're doing.
But why do we need to know lawn cutting versus property?
Oh, I see. Oh, I understand. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought,
And why are they being charged $37 less than the other businesses?
Well, there does seem to be a distinction between a physical place, brick and mortar, versus service transient service, yeah.
I think that is the reason.
so I think the exercise in this is we need to understand currently how they're using it, who developed it, and whether or not there's the capability for this to be modified that does not create a lot of, angst and concerns in the part of the clerk's office. We've got to work with them.
I think it would be
Yeah.
the opposite.
Yeah.
I think they'd be, thank
I'd be
you.
thrilled.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure
We're
if,
making an impossible task
This goes back to
easier.
a recommendation we made, and the council agreed to do it.
Yeah.
To across-the-board increase in fees. We could very easily, because I've got all this stuff in software myself.
Right.
We could easily make that a two-part recommendation. First of all, put the cost of living increase in it.
right,
every
which
year.
can be done through the finance
Secondly,
office.
consolidate and eliminate some of these licenses that we don't need. We don't need a fortune teller's license. We have a license that talks about newspaper boxes. We don't need those things. We don't read newspapers anymore. So, my point is, we can easily do it because all the data is there for us to say, let's consolidate and streamline the licenses themselves.
And Dennis, I don't think anyone would disagree with you. I just don't know if there is a person who exists in this building who has the skill set to sit down and modify an Excel database and work with the clerk's office to be able to do so. I'm just being honest about that.
No,
So
I-
we may come up with what it should look like, but the fact of the matter is, we still have to find someone to execute on that and work with the clerk's office to make sure that it's something that they can work.
That also sounds like it's probably not a long-term job, like that's
No,
something
it's
that
not.
a consultant or
Yeah,
even
exactly. But that's
someone on
somebody that
Fiverr or
we
something.
have to go out and hire and identify.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to, get us too far down the path. The first thing is, look, to Erin and her team, we think we can help you make some modifications to streamline this. If we get the approval for an IT resource to modify this based on, your work efforts and the ability to get reporting out of this of value to the city, that's where the conversation needs to
So
go.
one of the risks of not streamlining it is, because it's so complicated, it's costing the city revenue, meaning you're not choosing all the right codes. You've not been trained.
That potential is
You know,
there.
You aren't, there are, while the tourism license and the parking license are mandatory, there are lines in the database that they didn't charge those people that fee.
Okay.
And that's revenue.
Okay.
So I do agree that Erin and her team, and now with Emily
Yeah.
not being here, they're already thin, right? But if we don't make this easier, it's going to be such a burden on her team and a training nightmare anytime that somebody new comes in. I would strongly encourage us to work with council to say, yes, first of all, we need a full-time IT resource for the city. But second of all, if we don't have that resource, these things can be self-funding. The revenue that the city will generate from a better process will pay for
Right.
the people that we need, and it's a one-time charge. Once you've paid for it, it's there forever.
Let's start with the conversation with the city clerk, who owns this process, right.
Call somebody in on a per diem, get
Right.
Yeah.
We do have an IT contract, so there might be.
Yeah.
No, there is, yeah. So
right.
let's start with just, giving Erin the benefit of
Martin, where are we?
weighing in.
I'm all set.
Okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to recommend we do?
Well, so I
This is an
think
easy
our next step
consulting.
is that I've heard some of your ideas and I've captured them. I think our next step is to brief council.
Okay,
Brief council with what?
The results
Of your analysis, and then the recommendation being, shouldn't you talk to the city clerk first? I think.
Yeah.
I mean, from my perspective, if you did that first, and you have the city clerk saying, you know something, this is a huge nightmare.
Or
Then
this
you
would
could
be of
go
a
in-
great
Or
value
there's a
to-
reason we need there's some kind of a grant reason or a whatever reason that we need to know the particulars of there may be things that they use this information for that we're not thinking about,
Yeah,
so.
I don't know
Her
enough about
input's
it.
really
Yeah.
important.
all right. We're going to have Martin talk to Erin and keep her up to speed with what we've talked about here.
Yeah, see
And,
Just for the purposes of all of us understanding, what is it we're going to be talking about with her, number one,
his analysis, and
okay?
I want to, from her perspective, I want to understand what are the things that are working and what are the things that aren't? And what can we recommend that will help her team to be able to handle this task more efficiently and effectively?
and if we did things like get an IT resource to simplify the codes, et cetera, would that be helpful to her?
With individual data fields
Right.
to capture.
Council can direct Chris to streamline the data.
No, I know that, but it'd be
With the
great if the
section.
city clerk would say,
I think.
Well, I'm sure she has plenty of ideas about the resources that she
Yeah.
needs,
I
so
think
that'd be helpful for us to
yes,
hear.
I mean, I think that we can, peer in and open the door, but I think that Erin needs to be able to, if she feels that this would be of value, I think that her support in our recommendation, yeah, so I
make it
think. that-
stronger.
Yeah,
So you're
yeah.
going to talk to her about data collection and ways to change that, and how much help she needs, okay?
Right.
I mean, she's got frustration points. I'm sure if we're doing this, let's hear what those are,
Right.
and what might be of value to her. And once that's done, then someone could help craft some kind of a training material. So when a new staff member comes in, everyone's doing it the same way that they should. And that's
No, let's take the one step further. The thing I sent you all was a proposal from a company
Yep,
that,
saw it.
Right.
that actually does this. They just got the Newark, New Jersey contract for their
Wow.
short-term rentals. So they know what they're doing. It's a national-based company. But one of the features, they do a lot of government services, but one of the things they've been doing is this new short-term rental data capture. And as you can see by the sheet I sent around to you, they basically will take this whole thing off the city's hands, and we become the recipient of reports and analysis done by them based on their data collection. They will assume the responsibility to get all of these data aspects collected and organized. I've set up a meeting with Kevin. Kevin has already had a meeting with them. And he's going to have another meeting, a group meeting, a Zoom meeting with them and Aaron and the finance guy. And they're going to talk about whether or not this is the kind of service that they would like to recommend.
So Dennis, can we step back one? bit? Would it still require us to modify the existing mercantile license database? Or just the, okay, so we would have to do that as a step one.
Exactly.
And then once that was in conformity, then this company would be an adjunct to be able to, okay.
This becomes the workhorse.
Okay,
Data
right,
collection and
okay.
analysis.
So I would presume that as part of these discussions, we're getting input from them, I would hope, for how this should be, our database should be structured.
Right.
Because if they're going to be going in and analyzing data or searching out, you want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that conforms to
Correct.
how, okay, all right. So
yeah.
Kevin and Erin are part of that discussion.
so you,
Yeah, now,
are you part of that? Are you,
I'm not, I wasn't going to be part of it. I was going to recommend that Martin be part of that.
Okay.
Because you're.
because the only,
already down
the only thing I'd ask is, I think it'd be extremely helpful to talk to a couple of references, particularly references that are more like our size
Yeah.
and have our kind of characteristics.
And part of that conversation needs to be, what do you currently use? What data set, what data do you use to,
Format.
yeah, are you using Excel or using Access? Or what are you using?
Exactly.
Or some other off-the-shelf
I mean, I
program?
look at Vail or Park City or something like that. I mean,
Right.
those would be,
They do have those,
oh, I agree that there's a downside potentially, but I think we should investigate it, for sure.
Yeah, so if there's a higher rate of return, Bob, then, it might be worth it. And with the
But the
reference
charging
calls,
structure.
right, yeah.
and it really is a state-of-the-art.
Lose control of what?
That become.
Control of what? Control of what?
Well, after we get the data, you know, if we have changes and stuff, are we gonna control it, or they?
Oh, they're only going to, the way this program, at least my understanding, we would still own the base system, Bob. So the mercantile application process would still remain in-house. What this program would do, my understanding is that it would come behind the scenes, sort the data, review it, and and be able to analyze it for us to make sure that we've captured everything we should on a given property.
Well, we're gonna have to have our people work closely with them.
Exactly.
Yeah, they use that data. It's our people that make the analysis, and it's our people that kind of
Yes.
follow up or on any enforcement decisions or anything like that.
So it is Erin, it is Kevin, it is those people need to say,
It's a resource,
yes,
essentially.
yeah, they're the ones that would drive and say, no, this is the program we use, that's what we would like to do. Are you able to utilize that and give us data back that we could look to optimizing?
And here's the kind of decisions we want to make based on data.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
What I would hope that they would, can I ask one more question? I mean, I would hope as part of this analysis also, that one of the things that we don't want to see is that we're self-limiting it just to the fact of the information we capture. Part of this is also, I'm hoping that they have the ability to look at the market and say, here, there's 1,500 properties that get rented within your cadre, and we see in your database there's only 1,422.
Yes.
So I'm asking if that's part, so Marty, I'm looking at you, like, as we go through this, that to me is then, that is value added, because then we're really knowing what the universe is by a separate third party. And I'm not sure if they have that functionality or capability, but that would be interesting to know, that piece.
So one of the,
They do, because one of their data sets is the property tax base.
Okay, great.
City.
one of the things that caught my eye was our proprietary identification system is enhanced by an expert property team ensuring every property has human eye verification.
Yeah.
That sounds expensive.
Yeah.
But, you know, maybe we should have somebody from that company come down and talk to us.
Yeah.
So I'll work with Kevin.
Yeah.
And I'll find out where we're at, and at an appropriate, if this software costs $200,000, we're not doing this. We're not gonna hand over our entire revenue for mercantile licenses to a software vendor. But, let me do some work on it with Kevin, and at an appropriate time, when it's properly sized, we'll bring it back.
I will say this, when I just quickly looked, there are a number of competitors to them
Yeah,
who actually have higher ratings than they do.
it's
So
a growing
just keep-
field.
So just, let's keep that in mind as well.
Can I just ask that Chris Gillenschwartz be brought into this discussion? Dennis?
Sure.
Marty, somebody? I just want to make sure that Chris is aware that we are talking to an outside third-party vendor on, development of a relationship, even if it's just investigatory at this point, especially if you're doing reference calls, any of those things. I just ask that Chris be brought into the,
All right, Marty's going to take care of it.
okay.
Good, all right. The fee ordinance, I think we talked about it just a little bit. And Maureen, I'm going to ask you to make the push for this.
So one of the things will be asking Kevin to do in preparation for the 2024 is to do an analysis on the fees. And I know you've done it in the past, so if you have that to send to me and send to Kevin.
Yeah.
Just do so, and then I will ask him to present something to council that looks at what might be done.
Well,
with
our
the-
recommendation, policy-wise, is to do an across-the-board
Right,
cost of living increase and then have it automatically every other year.
okay, all right.
Yeah,
So just put
I do think we got so out of whack. It's been 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, I
If you
think.
have just a smaller increase each year,
Yeah.
it seems like a much more reasonable
Right.
way to do it.
Right, so, yeah, let's just get the information, and then I'll ask Kevin to take a look at it and make a presentation to council,
Okay,
okay?
all set for that. Maureen, do you have any update on?
Yeah, so, you know, I'm just going to give a very brief update. The work group, which is Marty, Steve, and I, we have a series of meetings set up next week again. We are currently looking at, you know, 3 of the shared service agreements, in court administrator, police, and fire. We are really very much still in the data gathering phase. And this very much has to do with meeting with each individual representative and trying to get an understanding. Sometimes it's definitional of, you know, what services are provided, you know, based on whether it's Cape May Point or West Cape May. There's also, you know, just the contracts and some of them, the age of the contracts and how long they've been in place. And things certainly have evolved and changed over the years. So we're trying to make sure that we really have a full understanding. We will be meeting next week on the court administrator with Chris Gillen Schwartz. Then we've had Deacon Fashal Chief in with some of his command staff with data there, and still have a lot of questions that we're going through internally just on some of the data. And then we're scheduled to have our first meeting with Chief Alex Coulter from Fire. And really, this is just fact-finding at this point in time. We have no recommendations to make. And I think what Steve and Marty and I have been talking about is that, you know, this is not necessarily one size fits all. We want to make sure that we're aware of the services being provided to the municipality, because it's different for each of the services. It looks a little different, and therefore it's going to take. We're trying to come to some commonality on it, but we're not there yet. So, you know, it may not.
What's the timing on the first?
The court one is first, and that is in the spring, Marty, of 20,
It's March 1st.
yeah, 2024.
That comes
Yeah,
up quick.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm not, so we've been focusing mostly on that one, and we're further,
Marty, you must, sorry.
we've been focusing mostly on the municipal court for Cape May Point, because it is the first one, and it's also the right size for us to use as a pilot project.
Template.
Okay. We're a little further along on that one in terms of the data. We know how much it costs, and we know how many cases they're doing. And we met today, really on Thursday, we're going to, a week from today, we're going to be presenting to Chris, this is our recommendation, this is what we want to bring to council. What do you think of that idea? What problems do you foresee for that? Because especially with Mike Voll leaving, we may need to have this negotiated before the end of the year.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we're a little further intentionally on that one. The other thing that we're looking to do is we're trying to look at in that data the first 8 months of this year versus the first 8 months of last year, both cost and volume, because it's seasonal. So you can't just take the first 8 months of this year times 3 halves and call that a full year annualized amount. Where we're heading right now is we 3 believe that, and I think it was Maureen's idea, there's a core charge for the service, and then there's a variable charge based upon volume.
Yeah, I get it.
Cape May Point has no complaints this year so far. Okay, well, it doesn't mean we don't charge them.
No court cases?
No court, in the category of complaints.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and we'll be using a 3-year average, so to a certain extent, but Cape May Point receives a value of our providing a court, and we receive a value in terms of being able to justify the expenses that we have over like with the economies of scale. So we're thinking that there's a piece that is not variable. You pay it
Right.
regardless of volume.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there's a piece that every complaint is some dollar amount, and every parking ticket is some much smaller dollar amount because it's so much less labor intensive. We think that after our meeting with Chris on Thursday, we'll have a recommendation to come back to on next steps to be able to get going on the Cape May Point Municipal Court Agreement.
But the police and fire are much
Let me
further
ask you
out.
about that.
Yeah.
Would it be a certain number of cases in the flat fee, or?
We don't want to really go there, speculate. Yeah, because I think that we're just sensitive to wanting to have Chris's input on whether or not this approach makes sense from his of his knowledge, because, we're looking at this, and Steve's been extremely helpful because of his legal background, but we've been looking at this, it's just very much about process and numbers. And what we want to make sure that we're doing is being mindful of the complexity piece of these things. So you just can't say it's this number and that equates to 5 minutes, or it's this incident and it equates to 20. We want to make sure that Chris is telling us, with his knowledge, that the information that we're looking at, that we've categorized it and we're valuing it the right way. And so I don't know that, I'm not prepared for us to talk, anything more at this point until we have a chance to really delve into that with him. Steve looked at the data and came back and had some good feedback to Marty and I, which just elicited more questions that we want to present to Chris. So, but I think by the end of the meeting next week, honestly, Dennis, we'll have a direction and probably a recommendation based on that discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you taking into account if there's something more, I'm going to use the word, it's probably not appropriate for court cases, but catastrophic?
Yeah.
Are you taking that into account in terms of this? Because what if something really tragic happens that requires a whole bunch of court cases to,
Or
I mean,
costs.
and you wouldn't want to,
So
you want to spread, I used this
Yeah.
example before, you want to sort of
Yeah.
spread catastrophic.
Yeah, I understand. And I think that we had a very brief discussion on an approach to something along those lines, Russ, but again, we don't necessarily, I'm not comfortable in just sort of saying, oh, well, we think we should do it this way because, yeah. But, yeah. No, I think we're trying to look at this in a way that says we're balancing the need for the service against volume that would be coming out of a particular borough or municipality. And we're trying to have a blend of the two so that it values the shared services, the ones that we're providing and the ones that they need. So
Because you might have 0 cases for 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden you have a
that's absolutely
Whopper
right.
year.
That's
I mean, it could happen that
absolutely
way. And
right.
So we've been talking about using 3-year running averages for both the volume, whatever volume we decide on, and the costs. So that also then factors,
Yeah.
that factors out. If you have a 23% increase in pension costs in 1 year, it doesn't all get slammed
Right.
on this fee, which they now haven't budgeted for in one shot. But it also affects the average for 3 years. So we'll recoup our money longer term while still being able to have some stability to the costs.
Because we can't just chunk off a person, right, which is what we have. And you can't keep assuming and pushing in and pushing out those expenses. It's not reasonable. So that's why we're doing the 3-year. It just makes more sense. And it also at least is level setting in the conversation to say we're trying to be fair and equitable, but there's a balance. And we've got to be able to know what services you're going to require. And we've looked at your history and we looked at, exactly, yeah.
Does Cape May Point use our judge and everything here?
Yes.
Yeah,
I was just.
yeah,
making sure.
yeah.
The other aspect that we did just find out is that there is one agreement that we haven't yet been able to obtain that is resulting in revenue for the city, but it's combined in another one. So now we're going to have to break that out.
What is that?
What is that one?
You don't want to say?
Yep.
Okay.
We
I will say that some of this it's been lessons learned for us. Where we think that, things, as most people do in business, thinks everything's, lined up, cut and dry. And what we're finding out that a lot of this has just evolved over time.
Right.
And a lot of it is based on the fact that we are an island community and helping and assisting. And so it's, it's trying to really get to the data and asking them to take a look at it and call it out. And so, we're getting there, but it's just, it's a process,
Yeah, Steve, I had a
I think
question.
the assignment judge is going to have to approve it in the end, anyway.
What kind of, when you get a situation where there's an extraordinary, as Russ said, like an extraordinary or catastrophic, what kind of cost drivers would that implicate us in?
Well, if we're talking about, candidly, that's probably going to impact more police as opposed to as opposed to court administration.
Yeah, I would
When we're talking about court administration, the good news is we're talking about our local municipal courts. We're talking about the municipal court for the city of Cape May Point, and West Cape May. So in terms of something that's catastrophic, I guess I would need to understand exactly what we're defining as catastrophic. Really, from a municipal court standpoint, it would mean simply a whole lot of tickets being charged for a certain violation, something along those lines.
Like when, which was the city, was it Stone Harbor? Somebody put in the parking meter thing, and they had a 40% increase in the number of tickets that were issued.
It could be, for instance, if each one of those tickets ended up being contested, then you have an issue that's going to.
That's
Right.
accurate, I think.
You're
I think I read
talking
it.
about, you're talking about resources, you're talking about time, you're talking about added cases.
But I agree with you. I think it would be more in the police side or something else. Fire.
Even a serious criminal events that would happen in the point, they're just going to be arraigned before a judge. It's not going to be, I think the biggest length of court case would be a drunken driving case. It wouldn't be
Yeah,
any.
because then it goes to county. If
No.
it's a serious case.
There was a
The
domestic.
serious cases would go to,
Yeah.
it would be an arraignment, and it's sent up to the county, yeah.
Right. And the way,
I'm trying
and
to think of catastrophic where you'd have a lot of court time, and the only thing I can think of is like, drunken driving cases
Yeah.
can go in a couple hours.
And the way the process is now, the involvement of the local communities from the court administrators is really involving with finding probable cause on the complaint, and then transmitting the complaint up to the county level. So you're correct. There's not a lot that happens in that
So
process.
it's a foreseeable cost.
Even the initial court proceedings, they're using central judicial processing now for all of the first appearances. So there may not even be any involvement by our judge at all on a superior court case. So it doesn't mean that it couldn't be a great use of resources, just may not be from the court
So
administration.
the costs become relatively predictable.
Predictable, yes, and that's important for the
I
municipalities.
think that's really,
We feel that's important for both sides.
No, that's good.
Right, yeah. So
Yeah, it
that's
wouldn't-
been our
It wouldn't be
approach.
like a Hindenburg thing.
No, we don't, yeah, and I think, it's not fair to expect that, another municipality, just as we wouldn't want it to have to react each and every year. It's something that is lined out, sets the expectation, has some minor caveat should, something occur. But otherwise, here's the game plan, and this is the basis for our agreement. They know it up front, and we also know. So everyone can plan accordingly.
So we're looking at something good by next meeting?
We're,
about West Cape May now, do they have their own judge over there? They used to, I don't know.
They have their own judge, yes.
Yeah, they,
Okay, so that's a little different story.
So court-
Because over
Yeah.
there, I think they even have a metal detector or something.
Yeah.
West Cape May, we share the court administrator. And we
Okay.
share
yes.
But they
their
have their own
direct
judge.
costs. They
Yeah.
have their own
Yeah.
building, they
Right.
have their own judge, they have
Right.
their own.
Oh, that's,
Right.
staff.
and that's a limited cost impact.
There is interest in pursuing that further.
Okay, all right. All right, well, that's good.
Yeah, so the other two, more to come, but, data finding on the police and fire, and we have time for those. But I think it's a good
Yeah,
exercise. That
because
was-
the issue that bothers me about the police and fire is we need to nail down specifically the defined services that are being.
And I would say, Dennis, that has been one of the areas, and also really nailing down some of the regulatory things. It changes a lot, especially on the police side in the last couple of years, their requirements. And so all of these costs and these expenses get layered in, whether it's training, it's all of those things. So
is
those
there
are the.
guidance around prioritizing concern, like prioritizing between municipalities?
So there are some, I think, expectations that have been expressed from the other municipalities that Deacon is aware of in the discussions as what they would like to see from, I'll just use an example, from a police force presence. And so we have to factor that in because then the city of Cape May needs to know how many officers we need on a given squad, which was one of the reasons why we looked at the numbers this past year.
Right.
And so we're able to see that in real numbers. They've got really solid data on that. That's where we'll be going when we're having conversations with Chief Coulter, understanding his world and the world that he services, and knowing what that might mean from, his personnel needs, whether today or next year.
I'm just
Because-
curious of, like, even with the catastrophe point, if there's something that affects across the board, the island, is there a guidance on how services and resources are
You mean from a regulatory
prioritized?
standpoint? We have
No, actually, just from so if it's the Cape May Police or fire that is responding.
Yep.
What's the prioritization and what's the guidance on
So
where
they
their
respond
efforts
to
go
where
first?
the incident is at that point in time.
Right.
They make sure they have coverage, for the other, municipality.
I guess just in given limited resources,
right.
is there
So,
a
yeah.
scheme
I mean, they have-
for?
In the conversations that we've talked about the fact that any response that is going outside of the three boroughs takes away from the responsiveness to the three boroughs.
Yeah.
So, for example, if an EMS call comes in off the island and Chief Coulter says, I'm not sending somebody 40 minutes out because they need an ambulance. There are ambulance services that are close to them. That's not our first priority. So the answer to your question is yes, but I think it's in the discretion of the people that are making those calls.
And even among the three boroughs, I guess is what I'm getting to.
So, in the conversation on fire protection, Cape May Point kind of wants to be left alone. They want you to be there when they need you, but they don't necessarily want you there when they don't.
They don't want a formal
Well,
arrangement.
when they have a call, West Cape May automatically goes to Cape May Point.
So police is all just,
Well,
No, you're talking about fire.
so fire is covered by a countywide mutual aid agreement. There are no shared service agreements currently on fire. I'm going to go to Wildwood this weekend. I'm going to interview the firefighters because they're having their annual firefighters weekend.
I was there.
You're going to interview all of them? You better get them early in the day.
What I'm telling you is, I don't know what you mean they want to be left alone.
I was referring to police protection.
Oh, no, well, that's a whole
Now,
different.
there
ballgame.
have been some very serious crimes in Cape May Point, and that means that the police have to be ready to respond. West Cape May,
Well, you can't, that's apple and oranges. When you talk about police, that's going to take a couple of weeks to do that.
so, but West Cape May wants the police, the level of police support to be almost immediate, almost as if they had their own force, because they used to. So there are different expectations of the different boroughs. It's complicated. It's very complicated.
Let me throw one more thing on the fire, because this is something I think we need to think about sooner or later, and that is that we are first responders, police first responders for the Marina District, even though that's going to be a separate
Yep.
discussion with somebody, or no?
So we have actually asked all of the department heads to separate out Lower Township,
Okay, all right. all
okay?
right, yeah.
Because Lower Township's not paying for any of this.
Well, that's what
And that
bothers me.
includes-
Wow.
And that includes Sunset Beach.
Right.
Now I'm going to be in the
Yeah.
paper for this. That includes Sunset Beach.
The
Sunset-
Lighthouse
Sunset
area?
Boulevard, the whole Lighthouse area, which is Lower Township.
All the farm, all the, yeah.
So we're
West Cape May
trying-
Bridge side of
We're
the,
trying to get out, how many times does EMS, does fire, does police respond to Lower Township? Because we're closer. We're going to be the first responders,
right?
as we should,
South of
absolutely.
the canal.
Well, wait a minute, I don't know that. I can't go along with that, as we should.
Well, as we should from a humanitarian perspective of if you want to save the life.
When we get a fire in say, the Lobster House, we are the closest, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But if we send our equipment first, then that leaves us sort of naked here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're paying for firefighters, career firefighters, for our families.
Yeah,
our
that's a resource that needs to be compensated.
All prime.
So there's.
Has that conversation happened with Lower?
because I know a
Wait.
lot more than you.
What's
do.
that?
We are looking forward to our meeting with Chief Culture next.
Has that conversation
one-
happened with Lower? I'm
Well, no
just
one's
curious.
saying that there shouldn't be some compensation, but,
Yeah.
but we need to do the right thing. We need to respond to the fire.
Okay.
Don't you think?
I got a lot of fire extinguishers in my house.
Can I shift gears here? Because we're going to have a report from you guys, preliminary report next time, correct?
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Good. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. Let me pass this out because
No, we've still got an
this is
agenda item.
something for the question you get all the time when you're sitting around your kitchen table. What is it that MTRAC does?
What were these?
Yeah, this
You've got two there.
We've been trying to figure it out.
Thank you.
there's some.
No, he had two.
Got
And
it.
before we go into this, I was remiss in congratulating one of our committee members who has been appointed to the zoning board as is it first alternate, second?
Second.
Second alternate.
Yeah.
So, Steve, we're,
I'm expecting that to lead to
Thank-
catastrophic outcomes.
it's gonna be horrible. Now, this is the list.
Thank you, appreciate it.
These are all the 17 issues that we have discussed since we began as an entity, and with the status line on to it. And this is just not to discuss any of these things, except for one, and that is recommendation number 4. Because things are heating up in town with respect to what services are being provided and who's paying for what. In particular, well, aside from the Pennsylvania Avenue medial strips, which the Coast Guard apparently forgot to remember that they're supposed to maintain, the regional school tax issue is something that I think the committee does not want to forget about, because this sheet shows you almost graphically how much of a problem has become in the last several years. And this is a 2-year update from our original recommendation, which was back on, I believe it was 2021. So the property tax coming out of Cape May in support of the regional district is growing exponentially. It's up to, I'm going to get by the way, I'm meeting with the superintendent of the lower regional on Wednesday morning to discuss this all, because I think we had a meeting with them 2 years ago, and they were very supportive of the notion that there should be a pilot program, which I was very pleased with. And so there's a new superintendent, so I'm going to be briefing him on Wednesday morning about this whole issue. And hopefully he'll be as supportive as Paul was when he was there. So the total cost is growing up. The enrollment's basically staying the same. And as you can see, our Cape May student enrollment in that district is about 5% of the total. And we're kicking in about 50% of the cost of that district in terms of taxation. And the per pupil cost, I know this looks staggering, but it's actually true. I did it a couple of times because I couldn't believe it was that much. But it's $137,000 per pupil for the regional school district. And of that number, there are 27 students who are connected to the military. Now, there are others, students who reside in the affordable housing pieces. They're not on this list. So it's just 27 military. So there'll be probably, I would say, another 12 perhaps. So what we're talking about, and this is really the reason why we asked the council to consider the pilot program. We're talking about $3,718,000 of expenditures which are not supported by any tax base. And we asked 2 years ago the council to adopt a recommendation, adopt a resolution supporting the notion of pilot funding programs. They did. They met with Congressman Van Drew. He said he'd take a look at it. We haven't heard anything from him since. We're going to try and reach out for him again. We're also going to try and reach out for informational purposes to the Coast Guard to explain what it is we're doing here and why it's not a threat to the Coast Guard. It's not anything at all except a recognition that Cape May taxpayers, everybody wants to be a Coast Guard community. We're the only ones who are actually paying for that. So we're talking about, and if you look, we did the analysis before, and I made copies of this in case you lost yours. But if you look at the Coast Guard property, it really represents an assessed valuation of $235 million. And if you generate 10% of that for the taxes, you're talking about $2.something million, which would basically,
Is this just one?
yeah, it's a 3-page report. It's recommendation number 4, 3 pages.
It's all one report there.
And so what we're looking at, I've talked to the mayor about this, and he's very much concerned, not just about this in terms of moving it and bringing it back on, what do you want?
Just hand me this down.
Yeah, bringing it back onto the agenda of Congressman Van Drew, but also the larger issue of, the issue of Pennsylvania Avenue, which the county is now complaining to us that we're not maintaining that. Yeah. Even though in the arrangement when we paved
That
it,
wasn't that,
It looks like crap to
yeah.
No, it's on the other side of Pittsburgh that they're talking
the
about.
other side of Pittsburgh,
islands.
where there's medial
Strips, yeah.
It's a county road,
That was a county road, yeah. I didn't think that
why
was
would the
our,
county take
our
care of it?
priority to maintain that.
because they want us to take care of it.
I think we paid a lot for them, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, we did. So, I mean, there's a lot, there's a growing sentiment amongst,
Why we ever did that is beyond me.
amongst the folks that we need to reexamine and bring up to the front of our agenda platter this issue of fair compensation for the imposition of municipal services and what it costs. And the biggest piece of this is the regional school formula. And I think we're still on pretty solid ground in terms of asking for a pilot program, because
Yeah.
it's a unique situation and we're the only town that I can find that is not getting compensated for this sort of thing. Now, so anyway, that's just a brief update of what we're doing there.
Just to let you know, Dennis, I had a chance to meet with Michael Testa as well, and even though he's not obviously involved with the federal government, and I also raised this issue with.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Good.
and he said he would talk to Congressman Van Drew as well.
Great, perfect, thank you.
You know, putting as many points of contact, I think, isn't a bad thing.
Yeah, and again, it's an issue that in terms of the larger federal budget, $3 million is not even the blink of an eye. So we'll see how it goes.
As you talk with homeowners, they don't differentiate between the county tax, the school tax, and the local purpose tax. They just know their taxes are going up.
Yeah.
We've held ours 4 straight years,
Yeah.
but that's not the perception of many of the residents
That's
of Cape
because
May.
the school
You're absolutely right. There's 4 pieces to the tax
Right.
Right.
package, and the municipal services is the only one that's really under control in terms of what we've been able to do as a committee.
It's probably not even though it's stated there, it might not be a bad thing to get that word out, because the fact of the matter is that it's only the local tax that really gets talked about, not that
Right.
piece of it.
That's
I mean,
right.
even the articles that are out only talks about.
Yeah, and remember our meeting last month.
Right.
When we met with
Right.
Kevin, who explained to us what's going on with the county. It's a bizarre and completely foreign way they calculate our taxes, and it goes up every single year.
With no discussion.
Yeah, with no discussion. And then don't forget, remember this, revaluation's coming up sooner or later, and that's going to be
Right,
another layer of icing on the
right,
cake.
that'll be a lot of headaches. Well,
Dennis, sorry.
Yeah,
if you could kind of dovetail the pilot with that, that would save a lot of headaches.
yeah, like, it's coming down the pike in pairs. Martin?
You mentioned the adjustment of many of the fees in the city, and also we had made the proposal on creating the parking assessment.
Yes.
Where are those 2 projects currently
Councilwoman? Yeah, you know,
Well, the fees, I mean, I think the approach on the fees should be that it just becomes part of the normal budgetary process.
Yeah,
And rather than making it
talking about-
an issue, just, I'm just going to say to Kevin, just take a look at it and make it part of the budget process. I don't know that we necessarily need to go into, a lot of other consternation about it.
No, but the MTRAC makes a recommendation for a CPI increase.
Yes,
It's CPI.
which would be part of the normal process every year, that there's more.
I may
routine
not have
business.
explained, I'm talking about the one where we find what restaurants need to be charged for the parking spots they don't.
parking assessment. the-
That I haven't heard any discussion on that, to be perfectly
I mean,
honest
it's,
with you.
the tail on that is very long. There's a lot of data work that would need to be done, and this.
Right.
and we-
I don't know whether or not, I haven't heard any appetite for undertaking that and looking at that. I mean, I'm not to suggest that people don't think it's, should be done, but, many of these, my understanding is many of these exceptions were granted as part of their site development.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
it's very challenging, I think, to expect anyone to go back and say, and oh, by the way, whatever you were approved for, that's my pedestrian version of this. I don't really understand all of the nuances, but it's like anything else. I mean, these were individual applications in
Yeah.
which some of these exceptions were granted, whether it be for a house or, a resident or, a
That's,
restaurant.
that's really challenging, and then also
I
it
don't
is,
know,
in essence, a municipal function, right?
That's
So-
separate, that's not changing.
Oh, okay, all
We wouldn't
right.
be changing any of that.
Okay.
We would just be saying, if you cannot provide the parking that you're required to by code, you have to contribute to a fund that then creates the.
Right, but those exceptions were part of their applications to begin with, or what they were granted,
There's gonna-
in their
a lot of
plans.
research that would have to take place if the city were going to actually do this.
Yeah.
We'd have to go back and review the site plan of every property.
Yeah.
Right.
See what-
I mean, you could,
And then I'm not sure it really solves the problem either. I mean, it's just kind of that people will feel like you've pushed this problem onto small business owners instead of, it's really a municipal
The proposal
function.
was that fund would then be used to create a transportation system, so that we can move people around the island, similar to other tourist areas that provide
We create-
transportation.
But maybe that's something to push back on the tourists instead of pushing it on the small business owners.
The proposal was
Well,
literally
every-
$100 for each parking spot.
Everything in the city is a user fee based.
They're making a lot of.
Yeah, I mean, like,
undertake and
right,
dial back
exactly.
something.
But I think you get a lot more resentment
I
from
don't
small
have any
business owners than you do from
If the
us.
answer is we don't want to do it, that's fine, but
Marty, I'm not representing council on this. What I'm saying is I haven't heard anyone bring this up as a discussion point to say, or Zach directing anyone to undertake this. I don't understand, I would not even understand what legally
Yeah.
you could do once you've already given a site plan approval for exceptions on those things. I don't even know what that would look like. As an owner of a business or a property, I would be very upset that I already had this approved and then there was a change. If we didn't apply, if the ordinance was given an exception at that time, in my view, is, again, this is a pedestrian's view, that exception stands.
Yeah, and the owner doesn't really have control over that. I mean, literally, if you're putting the cost on the burden on,
Well, the very-
it's really literally who's bringing the car to the island, right?
Yeah.
which is their patron.
Restaurants.
But then you're charging the restaurant for their patrons, so that's not, and that same person who brings the car to the island, they don't go to just one restaurant. I mean, literally, this is like, I'm not suggesting this, but it's much more like a Cape May Bridge
like a bridge.
toll, right? It's really that more than it is like if you're going to bring a car on the island, then you have to.
When you apply to the planning board for a site plan review,
Yeah,
and you ask for a variance because you can't find, you don't have 25 parking spaces on your property, then the variance says, okay, you don't have to have
Right.
25 parking spaces. But this proposal is clearly different because it says, "Well, help us compensate for the 25 spaces you don't have because we need 25 spaces.
Exactly. And it's really a municipal issue. Instead, this plan seems to push it back onto the small business owner who literally couldn't, I mean, the lots are Victorian lots. You know, the lot size of the property is a Victorian lot. It doesn't account for 25 spaces.
The alternative is that it's pushed on the taxpayer. And MTRAC's recommendation is that it's the businesses that benefit. It's the businesses that should fund the transportation system, not the taxpayers.
No, I don't think the alternative is to push it on the taxpayer. I think the alternative is to push it on the visitor, right? Or whoever is bringing the car, which might be, and so maybe then it's some part of the, you know, if it's a municipal tax on the,
Well, it's going to go on the visitor because when the.
it's just the perception. I understand that it will be passed on as a cost from the business, but the perception is going to be, from the small business owner's perspective, is you're punishing me for not having spaces. Whereas if it was part of a tax on, you know, like the 1% municipal tax on food services or what, like that kind of a thing, then it's very clear that it's the patron that pays.
Patrons are already paying. They're
Right.
paying for the meter.
Yep.
They're already being charged. But that's not going to solve the parking problem to create.
But the parking problem isn't created by the small businesses.
Sorry?
The parking problem isn't created by the small businesses unless you're saying we're punishing them for being successful and bringing people into the small business, right? That,
Take a look at the Washington Street Mall. How many parking spaces are available in that mall? And there's 100 businesses there?
right. They can't be responsible for not having, exactly. I'm agreeing with you, I think, that, you know, the
Variance said-
small soap shop can't be responsible for not having it. This is really a municipal issue, right?
I don't think we're trying to punish the businesses. I think we have had a problem for 45 years.
Yeah.
We're trying to come up with a solution, and the solution requires funding. Where do we go for that funding? We have a variety of choices, and the choice that we landed on was that the businesses benefit from tourism. It is the businesses, and it's a small fee. It's not a huge amount of money. It's a couple of entrees for a restaurant. It's not, it is necessary for us to be able to finally make progress on what has been in the papers since
Or else the
the mid.
taxpayers pay.
Well, never, the taxpayers will not want to pay for this, and they shouldn't be paying.
They shouldn't be paying for it. Yeah.
But who does pay for it then? And that's the dilemma we've had for the last 40 years. It's a real problem.
Saying that taxpayers should pay for it. I think you're just saying, is there a better way so small businesses don't feel like it's.
If there is,
And if there's a better way, then we ought to talk about what those better ways are.
Exactly.
I mean, you're right, if it was a toll into the city over the bridge, then that would be a way.
Right, and it's like directly related because if you know, then it has a countervailing push on don't bring cars into the city, you know, like,
No way for them
I'm not,
to the businesses if they don't bring their cars, because there's no transportation system.
right, but then that should fund that would help fund and I'm not suggesting, look, it's already backed up enough, I'm not actually suggesting put a toll in, but there is some sense of, like, that, isn't that,
If you bring a car, listen, if you bring a car in now to a lot of places, it's extremely expensive to bring a car in. And it's much more expensive to bring a car in if you're not a resident of that place versus.
you look at like Martha's Vineyard or, yeah.
Vineyard or Natug, you know, but there are other, so there may be a way to have it, to do something that you bring a car into this city, you pay more. And if you're a resident of the city, you don't pay as much. Why not?
Well,
My question was, we've made a proposal, where does the proposal stand? If
Yeah,
the
no,
proposal is
I
not the
hear
one that the city wants to go with, let's not do it, but.
Has it proposed to the city?
Yeah, but I think Maureen was saying is it hasn't really, it's not picking up any traction, and so I think we have to think about what's the practicality
Yeah, I
of
mean,
it.
Dennis, you presented it as an MTRAC recommendation, you know, and to be honest, you know, there are times when not everything is, you know, acted upon. I
Right.
don't even remember if it was discussed afterwards. I'm just being perfectly frank. I don't recall.
I don't think it was.
I mean, did you get any, did you receive
No,
any feedback?
Actually, that was Marty's question. What is the feedback?
When I look at it politically, I mean, I'm not sure anybody would want to touch it politically, right? Because then, and I'm not speaking for anyone.
That's why we have an MTRAC committee, because the MTRAC committee's function is not to craft political solutions.
Right.
Could I suggest, however, that I thought part of it was that when the parking commission was dissolved, that we were still going to move forward with potential funding solutions, but it was going to be out there and waiting for the parking commission to be
Well, no,
put together.
approach was just the reverse of that. The approach was, let's institute the funding solution so that when the parking committee gets its act together, we'll be ready to go.
No, I didn't think it was to institute it. I thought it was to work on it, and so that by the time the committee got back together again,
Correct.
we would have a head start.
So once we say, okay, this is the funding mechanism we're going to use, now we can tell people this is how much money you're going to have.
Yeah.
Design the solution. We didn't design the solution.
But I didn't think it was going to go anywhere,
But
Martin,
in order for
until,
us to enact this solution,
but I didn't think it was going to go anywhere until the
That's fair.
parking committee was reconstituted.
That's fair.
I really didn't. That's the way I was left with
there's
it.
so much research that has to be done for us to implement that. It has a very long tail. So if-
I'm not disagreeing with that aspect of it. I'm just saying what I had heard was exactly what I said, that it was not going anywhere until the parking committee got constituted. That's what I heard. And I think the fact that the city has not even done anything with it as yet would perhaps
heard
suggest that.
from,
I'm sorry?
heard from, you said, that's what I heard.
When we had this discussion before, that's what
I
I,
think that's a legitimate.
that was the way it was all started.
I think,
And Martin, I think it was even before you got on the committee, to be fair to you.
and I think we should also expect that there is, at some point in the future, a parking committee convened so that we can start to look at solutions.
Exactly.
Or the other option would be to simply say, we're not going to worry about parking. It is what it is. And, I mean, because that's what we've done for the last 30 years.
Or add additional options.
Well, so your idea that there's a dual path,
Yeah,
I think it's a good one.
yeah,
So it doesn't mean that both paths have to go
simultaneous.
at lockstep,
Yeah.
down the road.
I hear you.
One can get a little bit ahead, one can get a little bit behind. If we don't ever decide to do anything, guess what? Nothing will get done.
Well, but we still have to have a city council that's willing to look at this. Let me contrast this with the shared services. The shared services, we got very strong support from city council to look at it.
Right.
Well, the master plan says parking
That makes
is.
a
I'm
lot
talking about city council now. I didn't get the sense from city council that they, until they had decided what to do here. And by the way, I don't know why we wouldn't look at other options as well. And
Right, yeah.
at the
I
same
agree.
time. Why not?
Other funding options?
Yeah. Why wouldn't we consider other funding
There
options?
is a lot of funding options.
Well, I don't know.
There's the businesses, there's the tourists, and
No,
there's the residents.
but on how to do it, on how to do it.
I think what the city probably needs to do is look at parking solutions. Like, for example, what the master plan has said for the last.
But then shouldn't we ask city council if they would like that be
parking
tackled? That's all I'm
garage.
saying.
Yeah.
Who wants a parking garage?
As a member of MTRAC that is
You know what?
invested in this,
My
if-
opinion of the parking.
Wait a minute, Pop.
if what we proposed is not acceptable, I think we should get that feedback so that we can go back to the drawing board.
That's fair.
You can build 10 parking garages and there'll still be a parking problem.
We're not building.
Because they'll fill it up and they'll still keep coming.
So Dennis, I would suggest that you send something to Erin from the MTRAC committee as the committee chair and say, the MTRAC committee has requested to hear, if the city would like the MTRAC committee and feedback on anything they would like us to do with regard to evaluating funding for transportation in the city.
Well,
And on the proposal, that was presented, I guess.
okay, and that's why I gave you that list of.
Or would you like us to seek alternate funding sources? Be very specific about, is the city interested in us pursuing this option, or would you like us to investigate other options?
And that's why I gave you this list, because
Yep.
I think parking is not the only issue to be raised that's not been addressed. There are
Yeah,
other things.
yeah, absolutely. So all I'm saying is, the only way, if you want to satisfy the request from the committee to know is the response, what is the status, direct it to Erin and say, we're asking council to give us a response on this, on what we recommended, and if any action needs to be taken by the MTRAC committee on evaluating what we recommended, or should we be looking at any other alternatives? Would they be interested in hearing other
What's
options?
good, what's not good about the proposal, and how can we refine it?
Right.
Let's adjourn. Okay, is anybody going to the
I am.
HPC meeting?
No, I'm not.
I am.
You are? I'm gonna go over.
I'm going to, yeah, no.
We're adjourned?
Yep.